what we know is we have to learn to live with some level of difficulty, some level of challenge, and some level of hardship most of the time in our lives. And so what we don't want is we don't want it to all be that, and we'd like to get rid of as much of that as possible. But the fact is that we really can live a good life in spite of a lot of things in our world. And what part of what we're talking about in this series is brokenness, and really it's kind of the key theme or key idea. And you could look at the broken walls from Nehemiah story and just almost be a bit puzzled. What is the huge deal about these broken walls? I'm hoping by the time we're done with it that there'll be a strong understanding of that. But let me just, in the briefest of terms, say what is the application for us from this story. It's what we're really talking about, what I've been hoping to talk about, wanting to talk about, planning to talk about, is the broken places in your life, the broken places in my life, and the broken places in our world. And not just to focus on them, but so that we can do something about it. Because, see, that's what Nehemiah chose to do. He chose to do something about the broken down walls. Now, today's message I've entitled A Plan of Action. And I know for some of you are planners, some of you are doers, some of you are like, that's me. I am a plan of action. I mean, everything I do, I tackle it, I pursue it, I get it done. I'm a get it done kind of person. And so for some of you who are feeling like, just try to teach me something new here today. Just go ahead and try, because, man, this is me. I am all over this. And you might very well be. I'm not going to say that I never come thinking I'm going to necessarily teach someone something brand new. What I think most of us don't need more information. But most of us need a little bit of inspiration and a little bit of direction and encouragement to do the things we know we ought to be doing anyway. And so oftentimes I think that ends up being my job, is going, kind of, I pardon the looseness of the term, but kind of like a cattle prodder, going, you need to go over there. We all know we need to go over there. Come on, I'm going to go over there too. Let's go, and so it's kind of like hoping to push us, encourage us, motivate us to take the actions we know we ought to take anyway. And so let's just go with me on this plan of action for just a moment, because I think it can be approached in many different ways. And most of the time, you can even think, well, I'll make a list. I'm going to have a plan of action. I'll make a list. I'll put together my plan of action. I'm going to kind of go behind that a little bit. But let's just say that if you say today, this morning, you're going, you know what, I've decided I'm going to get myself a college education, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, if you're going to put together a plan of action for college education, there are some things we're going to talk about today that have to go into that. And if they don't go into it, it'll be a very short-lived goal. You could say, I want to become a meteorologist. The reason I chose meteorologist because many of us think we already are meteorologists. We're as good as the weatherman anyway. I mean, shoot, I can guess. I mean, they can guess. I mean, who do they always say this, and it turns out to be something different, or But I will tell you that if you go down that road, there's a lot of science involved. And just because you think sometimes you outguess the weatherman, you will find it to be quite a journey, quite a pathway, quite a road that you'd have to take. And so your plan of action can't just be, I want to be a meteorologist. Your plan of action can't just be, I want a college degree. I'm going to give you a little simpler one. You might be sitting here today and go, if I don't clean my house this week, I'm either going to clean my house or I'm going to commit suicide. One of the two, I mean, I cannot live in this pigsty any longer. Something has to happen. So if you make and I know some of you are going, well, I clean my house every day. It never gets dirty. That's great, but I know that doesn't fit that shoe fits for some people, doesn't fit for everybody. And so if clean your house is like something you really have to get a plan of action, you have to do it, and it almost seems like you have to get that plan of action every time. See, the fact is this. You can think about cleaning your house. You can even make a list of all the things you're going to do about cleaning your house. But having a plan of action has to supersede that. There has to be something bigger than that, because what I know about most list makers, it's fun. I'm a list maker to some degree. I'm not completely that, but I do that. And what I find is that sometimes if you're not careful, you can think making the list is getting the job done. And you carry your list around. I'm going to clean my house. I'm going to wash the car. I'm going to wash the dog. I'm going to bathe the kids. Whatever, you make your list. You make your list. Saturday's coming. I got to bathe the kids, Can't take them to church dirty. Have to send them to school dirty, but, and so our challenge is this. How do you move from just being a list maker to being somebody who gets stuff done? Now, some people, you think, some people, if we were having a discussion just about a plan of action, some people would say, let me give you my advice. My advice would be this. Go ahead and make your list, but then make your list, start on your list with the things that you hate to do. Start with your list of the things you hate to do. Because if you get the hard things done first, then what will happen is it'll be fun doing the rest of the list and things you like to do. You know what? That works for you, but that might not work for somebody else. So someone else might say, well, let's do the easy stuff first, because then we'll have a lot of fun. Then we'll have the energy and excitement to do the hard stuff. Now, I know if I were to take a vote on that, it would at least probably be split. It'd probably be split more like 60 and 40, because I think most people think do the hard stuff first. That's what. But not everybody thinks that way, and not everybody's going to do it. And you can say you can't make a case that it's right or wrong one way or the other. And so what has to happen is this, and that is that we have to find what works for us. If there's something that matters, something we need to get done, we have to find what works for us. I want you to turn your sheet over if you've gotten it. If you haven't, go to the back side of your sheet. And where it says homework. Now, if that word just like totally bothers you, just mark it out, okay? But that's just what I called it for simplicity's sake here. Homework. And I'm not going to have you do your homework now, and I'm really going to recommend you do not mess with this as far as writing anything in it while we're in church today, okay? Because the chances are you might write something that the person beside you think would impress the person beside you, or you write something different just because you don't want to depress the person beside you, or you're afraid someone behind you is looking over your shoulder and they're going to see, so you're thinking in terms, no, I want this to be straight from your heart. And I want it to be something that you have chosen to do because you really want to. Not because I've said you should or anything else, but because you want to. And here, I'm going to give you a couple of things to add right at the top, right at the beginning. Okay, it says define your greatest need. I could also, maybe right above your, write the. Maybe, because some cases the might fit better. Find your greatest need in your life, the greatest need in your life, however you want it, however it resonates best with you. So put the above your, and then off to the right of define your greatest need. In brackets, put the broken places. The broken places. In other words, we're not really saying, if you've got an area of your life that's it's working on all 8 cylinders, or all 4 cylinders, whichever cylinder, how many cylinders you have. But if it's working on all cylinders, then that's not what obviously you're already acting on that. You're already paying attention to that. You're already doing things on behalf of that. And so we're not talking about, I'm talking about the greatest need or the places of brokenness in your life that need some plan of action. Something in your life that is broken and needs to be fixed. And in some cases, it might be a quick fix, but in most cases, it's a long-term fix, and that's why sometimes we resist getting engaged with it. So the list here is not comprehensive, but I will have to tell you, it seems to me like it's plenty good place. There's plenty there to do. And so I wouldn't even recommend you tackle all of these. I would recommend you tackle ended up being what might be one of the top ones or one of the 2 top. And so define your greatest need in your life personally. And you know, the thought ran through my mind when I was writing this and putting it together. I thought, I don't know why, but it came, Harley Davidson sort of stuck out to me. Like, and I'm thinking, no, Rod, that's not your greatest need. And so, you know, so if you would trick yourself into thinking like that, don't think like that. That's false thinking. That is not greatest need or something along that line. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in what makes your life work or what makes your life dysfunctional in your marriage. Now, understand that whenever we're saying this, we're talking from your perspective. And so if you do have something here that you feel like is broken in your marriage, you need to identify it, and you certainly need to go over to the need to act category. But here's what I want to say is you need to be willing, if you're going to put it down on paper or if you're going to even think it in your heart and your mind, then you need to be willing to talk to your spouse about that. Because if you don't, you're not acting on it. This is something that you're willing to take an action on. With your children, and it could be everything from spiritual development. It could be everything from discipline needing to be tightened up. It could be, there's a whole variety of things. I'm not going to tell you what all it could be. Spending more time, reading to them more. Just the list can go on and on. You have an idea of what that is. What is the greatest need? And then I should put child there because realistically, it's not just a blank check, one thing for all children. What we have to do is identify each of our children and kind of what the needs are, where they are, the different stages they are. With your parents, and my parents are both in heaven, and so you could say, well, that's all wrapped up, Rod. You know, you're not going to have it. But you know what? What I've come to know is you can have a parent that's passed away a long time and still have parent issues. You know, and I'm grateful that I don't have those feelings except for this. I do still... I still have grieved a lot more over my father's death because I was so young when he died, whereas my mother's death is just, it's like, it's okay. It's okay. Wouldn't mind having more years with her, but it's okay because we really had that full life. And so, but sometimes you go, is that something that I need to look at, something I need to work on, is that a broken area in my life? And whether your parents are alive or not, it might still need to be something that has to be looked at and say, is there some action I can take with regard to resolving some of the feelings I have, some of the things that affect my emotions? Number 5, on your job, define your greatest need on your job. Now, I also pictured this. I was thinking as I was writing these things, going, I know what the number one thing is going to be here on this. A raise. I'm like, okay, what is your greatest need on your job? It's a raise. So I know, and that might be true. Okay, that might be true, and that might be what you need to put. But I'm just simply saying, think broader than that too. Maybe even think in terms of how. I want you to think personally. You can't control your boss. You can't control other employees around you, or you can't control your employees. You can't do it. So the person we can control is ourselves. So really put it in that personal box as much as possible. In your relationship with Jesus, what is your greatest need? What is the broken place there? In your world, that means the whole aspect of your world, wherever you go, wherever your footprint takes you, that's your world. And then in the world, which is obviously the greater extent, things that are kind of beyond us, but sometimes we have the capability of affecting that, and sometimes God calls us to that. That's really what Nehemiah got called to as well. So just to have that, I want to kind of go over that with you to have a sense of this is where I want you to go at the end of what we're talking about today. And so if you would, look with me at a memory verse, and it says this: without consultation, plans are frustrated, but with many counselors, they succeed. I'd like to clarify 2 things about it. I believe this verse is so accurate and so correct. First of all, because it's the Bible. And secondly, because it was written by a very wise person by the name of Solomon. And then thirdly, because just practical life really reflects that shows that that's the truth. And so typically speaking, once we have an idea and we run it past somebody else, we interact with other people, it will get adjusted. It'll be tuned a little bit. Sometimes we may not always like that, but in the end result, I think you always come out with a better product. But I would say this, and that is, you have to look a little deeper than just what's said here. With many counselors, they succeed without consultation. Plans are frustrated. You run into all kinds of problems because there's so many things you haven't thought through. When you meet with other people, you interact with other people about it, you end up getting affirmation, but you also sometimes get criticism in hopefully a constructive way to make it better. And so those things end up taking some of the frustration out of the process. But with many counselors, they do succeed. Here's what I want to say. That is this. I do agree with that statement very much, but I believe if you were to sit Solomon down right here this morning, we were to interview him, one of the things that he would say, make sure that the many counselors that you talk to are the right people. They're the right people. Advice today is a dime a dozen. I mean, it is. In fact, we have so many people who are willing to tell you. I mean, in our culture, everybody's an expert at something. And some people think they're an expert at many things. And so it's really, really important for us to know and understand that we cannot expose ourselves to people who will lead us astray, or we should not. We should do everything we can. And we need to make sure it's the right people. I have found this to be true in most people's lives that I've interacted with. If let's just say, for instance, that someone's headed into some relationship difficulty. If they talk to people who have had a bad experience in a relationship, somewhat similar, just kind of on the street, coworker, that kind of thing, typically speaking, they're going to get some pretty bad advice. Just because somebody's gone through something you've gone through does not make them an expert. It's kind of like this. I've had people, it's been a long time, and it's not ever been anybody within our church, but I've had phone calls sometimes from someone I didn't know at all, just saying, I remember this one in particular, it was quite a few years ago, just said, hey, I was just wanting to know, do you marry people? And I said, well, I do. And he said, well, would you marry me and my fiance? And I said, well, here's kind of the plan of action, and that is, first of all, I need to have a meeting with you, and we'll just kind of hear your story a little bit, where you've come from. I asked, are you a part of the church at all? He said, no, we just kind of picked you out of the phone book. So anyway, she said, well, I explained I have one meeting where we need to kind of talk through who they are, where they're coming from, why they think it's a good idea to get married, and then I have at least 6 sessions that we need to go over for before I would marry them. And she said, oh, well, that would never work. And I said, why is that? She said, well, we're getting married tomorrow. And I said, well, I'm not here to bust your bubble or anything, but maybe it'd be a good idea to talk to somebody, and maybe you could put this off, and let's, and I'll be glad to meet with you if you can do that, but I can't marry you tomorrow. And she goes, yeah, but you don't understand. We've both been married before. We already know what this is about. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you probably do, but there might be something missing here as to why we're doing the repeat. And that's not true for everybody in every situation, but I'm just saying, what we have to know and understand is that sometimes people give us all kinds of ideas. You can just do anything. You can do this. You can do that. You can do whatever. Be careful who you listen to. Yes, get input from good people and the right people, and with that, you will have a much greater chance of succeeding. I also watch people right here within this body of Christ who intentionally develop a team around them that advises them. And I don't mean that they control them or manage, but I'm just saying where they get input. And I will have to tell you that I believe those people I watch them make better and better and better choices, because they don't just up and go make a random decision. They run it past a few friends, people that love them. What's the basic criteria? Somebody who loves you and loves God. And if they don't love you and love God, I wouldn't get their advice, because they don't have a vested interest. And if they love you and love God, you say, well, I don't know if anybody loves me or not. Well, start working on loving some people, and you'll find out. You may have to be the one to start. Let's go on to our outline. And let me give you kind of a real brief, because we're diving right in here to chapter 3 of Nehemiah. And if you haven't been here, then it could be a little bit of a little jolt. The walls of Jerusalem were broken down. The gates were burned. The burned gates kind of symbolize for us here undefined boundaries that allow access to us that could be harmful. When the gates were open in a city, that meant kind of anybody could come and go. And I believe one of the areas that God really wants us as believers, as people, to really work on is making sure that we have our gates in good repair. That not just anything and everything can come into our lives, but that we actually have a process by which we allow things and people into our lives. And like I said, many counselors is wonderful, but if you have the wrong ones too close into you, it will be disruptive and damaging to your life. And just because you have the right ones doesn't mean they can tell you what to do, but it still means you certainly have your own individual decision-making capacity. But when you interact with that, it makes it much more healthy. And so gives you a better perspective. And so this news is not new news. In other words, the walls being broken down, the gates burned. This isn't brand new news. So this is actually centuries old. If you go back into the history, and if you want to talk more the history side of this, come on Wednesday night, and we can take the time to dive into that to our living room class, and that's where we follow up on Sunday morning. That's at 6:30 on Wednesday nights, and so we can get into some things I don't take the time for on Sunday morning. But this is century old news. This is not like some brand new thing that happened. But there was something that was newer on the horizon, and that was a while before this incident occurred with Nehemiah's brother coming and telling him about the walls, was the fact that the temple in Jerusalem had been rebuilt, and yet the city was still unprotected, which meant this great temple was restored, and yet anybody and everybody could kind of make their way into the city and do whatever they wanted. So there was no protection for the temple, the place where God met with his people, and especially in that time period, that symbolized God's presence in that nation, and there was no protection for the city, for the people, or for that relationship with God and what had been done to preserve that or bring it back to a sense of restoration. So here's where we pick up with Nehemiah. He's come back, he's got the king's blessing, and he's come back to Jerusalem. And here's what I'm going to suggest to you is a good way to approach a plan of action. The first one is this: define the need. Define the need. In Nehemiah chapter 2, a couple references back to chapter 2, then I said to them, you see the bad situation we're in, that Jerusalem is desolate and its gates burned by fire. Now, this is Nehemiah speaking to people who lived in Jerusalem. And he's saying, you see the bad situation we're in. Now, if you don't think there's a need, there'll be no reason for you to have a cause. If you think if your marriage is perfect, and when I say that, I don't mean perfect, but I'm saying if it's going great, then, I'm not saying you need to do anything to it except keep doing what you're doing. If your children are in your relationship with them is the place you want it to be, then keep doing what you're doing and stay on track of that. If, go down that list again of things, then that's fine. But if you find something in that list where you're saying, something's not right here, this is just not right, this is broken, this is not working well at all, we have an absolute communication breakdown here, or I don't know when I've spent 20 minutes playing dolls with my little girl in the last I can remember, or I can't remember when I've played cars with my little boy or thrown the ball to him. I can't remember when we've said a prayer at bedtime. I can't remember whenever we've had some fairly in-depth conversations with my middle school or high school child. Then I'm not asking everybody to say, oh, we have a mess here. I'm just simply saying, do you see a need? Is there a need? In some area one of those areas or another area, there's a blank down there, you can add other areas to it. Define the need. The need in this situation is Jerusalem is desolate and its gates are burned by fire. The reason that mattered is because the children of Israel had lost their identity centuries ago. Jerusalem had lost its identity as a nation of God centuries ago. And so they still had that identity, but they didn't have a place. There was not a gathering area. And Jerusalem was desolate. Its gates were burned. The temple had been rebuilt, and yet the city was a mess. And so, number two, you define the need. First of all, if you don't define the need, your plan of action will be very short-lived. The second is this: explain why a response is necessary. It says, come. In Nehemiah chapter 2, the last part of verse 17, come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem so that we will no longer be a reproach. What Nehemiah, there's a lot he's saying in this. One of the things he's saying is we are God's chosen people. We have this covenant relationship with God. We broke it. He'd already identified that through the prayer. We broke it. We busted it all up, but we have rebuilt the temple, and here we are living in this par kind of lifestyle where we are being mocked by the people around us. We're being taken advantage of. And he wasn't calling for a war against them. He was just simply saying, this isn't a way to live. This isn't any way that gives honor to God's name. This isn't any way that we're not living in a way that builds respect among people and even shows respect for ourselves. It's a reproach. And so you have to explain why a response is necessary. So if you go to your kids tonight, you haven't prayed with them for the last year, and if you haven't, come up and we'll give you a swat on the hand or something. But if you haven't prayed with them too long, or you haven't done something, and you go in tonight and you make this big declaration, well, as of tonight, me and my house, we're going to pray for 30 minutes before you go to bed every night. Now, and I know that's extreme. I'm just simply saying, make sure that you explain to your children why you need to pray. I think I maybe mentioned this, but Skylar, we were on vacation this summer. We were sitting at a pizza restaurant, and we said a prayer over our food. And when we got done, she goes, "You don't have to pray." I said, "What?" She goes, "You don't have to pray." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Nobody else is praying in here." And so I said, "You know what? Maybe I need to explain a little better about why we pray at mealtime. Maybe I need to give an explanation here, create a little more understanding." And so we can do things and just do them, or we need to help explain to our kids why we do them. Explain, why to your spouse it matters that this aspect of your relationship needs to work better. You have to give a reason for it. If you can't explain a reason, then it's going to be very difficult for you to do anything. I don't care what kind of a list you make. You have to have an explanation, be able to explain why a response is necessary. Number 3, give a reason for the timing. Because why, okay, so your spouse, don't blindside your spouse this week. You write, you have this big response back here, what the greatest need is in your marriage. Don't blindside them, Don't go, we need to have a really big talk tonight. That just kind of sets it up for oh man, what is going on, And it's almost like you got the defenses way up. So you start with yourself. And you explain the timing. Let me explain the timing for this situation, Nehemiah. In Nehemiah chapter 2, again, verse 18 says, I told them how the hand of my God had been favorable to me, and also about the king's words, which he had spoken to me. Then they said, let us arise and build. So they put their hands to good work. One of the things that we have to do when especially it involves someone else besides ourselves, we have to give them an understanding of why, and we also have what the need is, and then why a response is necessary, and then why now? Why now? Why is this a good time? Am I hearing something, or is that just... Okay, who's ever playing music in here, take it outside. No, it's, I don't know what I was hearing, but I was hearing something, so I'm not hearing it anymore. Is that true? Okay, good. We're good. I'm just excited. You know what? Whoever did that, I'm so excited you did it because that means my ears still work. Sometimes I'm in doubt. I'm like, I just want to know that they really work. So give the reason for the timing. The timing for this was, out of all the time period, here was Nehemiah. Here he was as a king's cupbearer, and at this moment, at this time in history, he found favor with the king. The king gave him everything he needed in all the permissions and all the supplies and also all the protection, everything else we talked about last week, to go and do this. So it's like, when there are times whenever it is ripe, and you have to act when it's ripe. You have to do it. And so he explained this to these guys, and they're going, let's rise, let's build, let's do it. So they put their hands to good work. Now, in your life and in my life, the timing might be, I hope it's not, because here's what I find, but it might be a crisis. Do you know that I would say the majority of people that actually come to personal faith have some kind of a crisis that occurs. Not everybody, but most people do. Have some kind of a crisis that brings them to an awareness that all of the explanations and answers and ideas and everything else that they had just aren't enough. They need something more. They need something bigger than themselves. And so in that moment, often there's an openness toward God. Oftentimes when it's in a marriage and it's a crisis that wakes it up, I've seen God miraculously work through people's crisis and save marriages. I've seen him put marriages back together. But my advice would be, let's not wait till a crisis. Because in a crisis, at that point sometimes the divide is so wide that it's easier to shoot arrows from the two forts at each other rather than to build a bridge of connectedness. Now, I would never say don't lose hope. Don't lose hope even in a crisis. Don't lose that hope. But just be aware that it's as much as possible, beat the crisis if you can. But if it does take a crisis, then you know without a doubt it's time. Something has to be done. We have to do something. Sometimes it's an open door as far as timing goes, an opportunity that avails itself that had not been available before, and all of a sudden the door is open. And so sometimes we want to stand back and we want to go, well, I was thinking it would be here, I was thinking it would be there, but all of a sudden this is the open door. If it's truly an open door, then oftentimes we should walk in it. Now, when I say that, there's a lot of clarification that should probably come with that. But so I'm not just simply saying any open door, but particular as it's related to the resolution of some challenges or some brokenness that's been going on for too long. A gentle nudge from someone or the Spirit. Sometimes it might be just saying to someone gently, before this escalates out of control, maybe you would want to consider going to Celebrate Recovery. Because oftentimes, if we wait until it's created this massive crisis for us, it's yes, please. I mean, Billy has said it so many times, and I love to hear it said in Celebrate Recovery. Whether you're coming to get your first chip the first time or the 50th time, we're glad you're here. And so all I'm speaking from a standpoint of let's not wait till then if at all possible. Let's not wait until we've ditched this relationship, ditched this opportunity. If God opens the door and it's a door, maybe an opportunity to get help for yourself. Maybe an opportunity, you hear about a counselor that just like you're going, I think I need that. That's exactly what I need. It might be an opportunity to, for a job. It might, whatever it is. If it's a possible solution to one of the areas of brokenness or great need in your life, then don't just walk past the door thoughtlessly and go, that wasn't the door I was planning on opening. Sometimes God opens doors that I've never knocked on. but it still was the door of opportunity God had for me because I was praying or seeking guidance about something of great importance. And what I have a tendency to do is define for God how he needs to work. I show him doors, and I give him opportunities, and I say, God, this is your golden opportunity just to make this work so well. And you know what I've found? God has absolutely no obligation to do it the way I told him to do it. And he has better reasons than I'll ever understand for that. And so I may have to walk through a door of opportunity that I didn't even define for him because he knew what was best for me. But when you do, it's when you have that gentle nudge, that open door, and that someone, maybe the Spirit prompts your heart, maybe someone encourages you who falls into the right people to give you advice. Sometimes it's a matter of us coming on new information. Sometimes it's a matter of us being exposed to something we hadn't been exposed to before, and all of a sudden we see things in a new light, and that gives us an opportunity. Number 4, appeal to personal motivations. Now, in chapter 3, I am not going to read chapter 3 to you, because chapter 3 is one of those chapters in the Bible that actually is very boring to read, but it has a lot of intent. Because basically what it tells you is all these different people and the fact that they built in front of their house, and if you'll see kind of some of the phrases down below number 4 there, they built by their own houses. This guy built to here, he picked up after him and built down along from there, and then in front of their own house they built, and then next to them, so someone built over to here, then they picked up and started building. They started rebuilding this wall, and every person, what they basically did was step out of their doorstep that lived anywhere within range of the wall, and they moved out to that area and started rebuilding right there, right in front of them. If it was broken down, they started rebuilding. Some of the priests and others started going to the gates and rebuilding the gates and putting them back on hinges and putting them together. You can see as you go through this chapter over and over, this guy did it, and the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy, until all of a sudden some significant progress was being made because they each one, by themselves, I guess they were sitting there, what good would it do to build? What are we going to do to rebuild the wall in front of my house if they can come across to my neighbor's house? So I guess they were looking at it that way. He's just simply saying, all of us, if you'll go out and fix yours, and you'll fix yours, and you'll fix yours, hey, we'll have made some progress, won't we? So that's what they did. And the whole chapter is just all about that. This person, this person, this person, this person, this person. And so they just have this amazing work going on, rebuild the wall, and they're doing it just understanding that, hey, this is going to help me. Do you know that even if your spouse comes to you sometime this week and says, that message that Pastor Rod gave that seemed like it was meddling a little bit into the marriage thing and all that, even if initially you're going, oh man, here we go again, we don't talk enough. Or we don't have enough money talks, or we don't have enough sex, or we don't have enough, what is it? You're feeling that? Do you understand that that you personally benefit from responding to your spouse's awareness that something's broken in the marriage? You personally benefit? I don't think going out and rebuilding the wall in front of their house was easy work. I think it was hard work. But now all of a sudden they could see that they would benefit. Whenever you see some personal benefit in something, we're always more motivated. Let me just tell you, in all those areas we're talking about there, if there's something broken in something you're connected to or in you, you will deeply benefit from working on it. You will. You might have sore fingers. You might have a sore heart. Your mind might be fatigued, but you will benefit from it. I promise. Number 5, he addresses the common cause. Again, all of chapter 3, and we've already kind of mentioned it, the fact that as each person benefits, the whole benefits. Everybody's benefiting. They can go out and go, hey man, look, I've got my wall up to this point. Hey, he's got his a little higher than mine. He's not doing as good as I am, but we're all getting there. We're all building this wall up. Something's happening. It's going to benefit everybody. It's just not a matter of me fixing my wall tall enough no one can come over. But the fact is, we're all going to benefit. They're going to benefit from me building the wall. I'm going to benefit from them building the wall. You also see the benefit for the common cause, not just for you, but for everybody. Number 6, not everyone who should help will help. Do you know that sometimes we don't do things because of what other people won't do? Well, I'm not going to wash the dishes because they're not going to clean the floor. I'm not going to take the garbage out because they're not going to mow the grass. All right, let's just all go down in a pile of stink, all right? I mean, is that really, and you go, well, that's fair. That's fair. It is, maybe it is fair. But until we get past this idea, I'm not going to do anything till everybody else does it. Well, I'd pick up the litter out. When I drove in here, I saw some litter out in front of the church. But do we pay somebody to do that? Or, I bet Pastor Rod would probably do that Monday. If I don't, we pay him enough anyway. He ought to be out there picking up trash. And, so, whatever, we're always thinking, I would do it, but I don't, but maybe everybody else doesn't seem to be doing it. So why should I do it? Now, if you look at, it's in your notes, so you don't have to look it up, but in Nehemiah chapter 3, the chapter we're talking about, here is one exception in this whole chapter. It says, moreover, next to him, the Tekoites made repairs, but their nobles did not support the work of their masters. Now, you had the high echelon of Jerusalem who were making decisions. They're going, yes, we're going to rebuild the wall. And then you had the average day guy come out here going, yes, we're going to rebuild the wall out here. But we had a little set of nobles, people who were in that in-between place. They were kind of the upper middle class, I guess, of that time. There maybe weren't many in that category, but they were going, nope, we're not going to support this. We're not going to do that. But there was a reason. And if you want to write this down, go ahead and write it down. It's Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 17 to 19. And you'll see the reason why they didn't support it. They were in cahoots with, everybody knows what the word cahoots mean, right? We live in Georgia. They were in cahoots with the enemies of Jerusalem, and they were financially making gain. So for them, the wall, and that meant they were also protected. So for them, the walls being built meant they were going to cut down on their revenue. So it was really going to go well with them. So they were going to sit it out. Go, And if you read Nehemiah 6, verse 17, 19, you'll kind of see how that dynamic was working. And so these guys are sitting back and going, and I could kind of suspect, especially since they were in that small set of people who were kind of in the upper middle class zone. They were certainly had a lot more financial means than the common people of that day, right there. Maybe they'd gotten a little fat and lazy, And so even within a marriage, I keep coming back to that one. I don't know why. I mean, there's a whole list here, I know. So apply this to any of these you need to. But for some reason, I keep coming back to marriage. And I'm not saying it's even a divine inspiration. I'm just simply saying that I am. So if it fits, wear it. You might not find your spouse very helpful at first. Well, we need to communicate more. Yep. We need to have more sex. Those headaches still keep coming, We need to pray with our kids. Go ahead, St. Teresa, you're the spiritual one around here anyway. You may not feel like you get much help. But I want to ask you something. If it's something you believe that will fix brokenness in your life, in the life of those you're connected to, or in the lives of those you love, Isn't it worth being the person who puts the extra effort in? Isn't it worth being the person who takes the first step? Isn't it worth being the person? I'm not talking about being unhealthy, and I'm not talking about being codependent, and I'm not talking about being run over by everybody. And so if you're being run over by everybody, you may need to stop some things. That might be what you need to do. You might need to let the laundry pile up for 3 weeks. You might need to, just let them know what it's like to wear underclothes for 3 days in a row, and then they'll start respecting you a little bit. I don't know the answer to your situation, but what I'm saying is, if something's broken and it's not working, then somehow mark it on here and say, I need to act. And how do you act? You define the need. You don't just do it because you're mad. You don't just do it because things are unfair. You do it because there's a need, because you explain why a response is necessary. You want your kids to be responsible adults. And just preaching that to them won't get it. I don't think you can preach your kids into compliance. Some of them you can spank into temporary compliance, But it's a lot more complex than that. So not everyone who should help will help. So just because everybody who should help won't help doesn't mean you shouldn't do something anyway. Just thought I would mention it. Number 7, start with what is in front of you. Start with what is in front of you. We complicate this stuff so many times. I know you're going, this is a plan of action? Rod, this is a plan of action. You're talking about philosophy here up until this point. You're just talking about ideas and thought. But if you don't have the right ideas, or you don't have the right philosophy, you don't have the right understanding behind it, everything will be short-lived. So I don't care if your plan of action is do the hard stuff first and the easy stuff later, or the easy stuff first, the hard stuff. I don't care if you need to put 29 things on a list. I don't care if you don't make a list and you just kind of have it all in your head. It doesn't matter to me. That part doesn't matter, because we all do that in some way or another. But the reality is, if we don't understand why we need to do what we do, or if we can't explain it even to ourselves, we'll just keep making half-hearted efforts at stuff. Half-hearted efforts. Now look at this verse of scripture in Nehemiah chapter 3, verse 1. Then Eliashib, the high priest, arose with his brothers and the priests and built the sheep gate. They consecrated it and hung its doors. They consecrated the wall of the tower of the 100 and the tower of Hanel. Now these are leaders. These were spiritual leaders. These are the people who had a lot of influence in that neighborhood. And here's what they did. They said, okay, we understand the need. We've all seen the need, but we've heard the need defined here, Nehemiah. We understand why a response is necessary. It makes sense that this is a time for us to do it, and it's going to help me. It's going to help the whole city. And even if everybody doesn't, let's go ahead and get started. Let's do what's right in front of us right here. And so they took responsibility. You can see that responsibility just fall out like a domino effect across and around that city and around that city wall. People began the great work of rebuilding the wall. And I just need to tell you, we just have to start where we are. Not where we wish we were, not where we hope we would be. We have to start where we are. What's right in front of you right now. Trying to make this old and true and powerful story as practical as I can for us. So once again, flip to the backside. I'm going to ask you prayerfully and carefully this week to sit down and work on this. And if you only write or respond in one area, not a problem. That's good. If you write something in all the areas, then what you need to do is prioritize and go, I'm not going to tackle that all at once. Choose one out of that to get back on the cause track and say, I can do something about this one this week. I can do something about this. I can define my reasons for why now's the time to act. And here's what I'm going to do. Our tendency is we want to rebuild Rome in a day. It won't happen. So what you take is one small step in the right direction. Do what's in front of you. Keep doing what's in front of you. The more you do what's in front of you, eventually you're equipped well enough to be able to hand a brick to the person beside you and to be able to hand a brick to the person beside you. One of the things that happens in our own personal development is when we develop over a long period of time, we keep doing what's right in front of us, right in front of us. God allows us the opportunity then to help other people rebuild too. Here's two tendencies we have. One is we want to do it all at once, which discourages us and we stop. And the second thing is we want to help other people rebuild their wall instead of doing what's right in front of us. Do what's in front of us, and if we do, God will give us many opportunities to work all the way around the wall and help other people. Let's pray. Jesus,